You want me to do what, now? Lieutenant Sarah Chen stared at her commanding officer with the kind of expression usually reserved for people suggesting casual walks through active volcanoes. Admiral Rochester cleared his throat. I want you to take your fighter and delay the Crick's battle fleet until reinforcements arrive. Sir, with all due respect, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, have you completely lost your mind? Sarah gestured at the holographic display showing nearly 30 Crick's warships bearing down on their position. That's not a battle fleet, that's a... Someone really hates this particular sector of space fleet. Lieutenant, I fly an A-76 Wasp. It's a great ship, don't get me wrong. Best fighter humanity's ever built. But it's still just one fighter against... She squinted at the display. 28 capital ships? Did I count that right? Because honestly, after 15 or so, the exact number stops mattering, and it becomes more of a, how spectacularly do I want to die situation. The Admiral's weathered face remained impassive, but Sarah could swear she saw the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Are you quite finished, Lieutenant? No, sir, I had at least 3 more sarcastic comments, and possibly an interpretive dance prepared to illustrate the sheer insanity of this plan. The Cricks don't know about Project Singularity. Sarah's next witty retort died in her throat. Wait, what? Your A-76 isn't exactly standard issue anymore. The Admiral's fingers danced across the holographic controls, pulling up schematics that made Sarah's eyes widen. The eggheads in R&D have been busy, very busy, and very quiet about it. Is that... Sir, is that a micro-quantum tunnel drive? Among other things. Now the Admiral was definitely smiling. The Cricks are expecting to find a small outpost defended by a handful of outdated fighters. They're not expecting to encounter technology that, technically speaking, shouldn't exist for another century or two. Sarah studied the schematics with growing amazement. These weapon systems, they're not just advanced, they're practically magic. Sir, why didn't anyone tell me my ship could do all this? Because until about 20 minutes ago, it couldn't. The upgrade package is being uploaded to your fighter systems right now. By the time you launch, you'll be flying the most advanced piece of military hardware in human history. And you want me to use it to fight an entire alien battle fleet? Sarah shook her head, but she was already grinning. You know what? I take back what I said about this plan being insane. It's actually completely insane, which somehow circles all the way back around to brilliant. That's the spirit, Lieutenant. Though I should mention one small detail. The Admiral's expression grew serious. The systems are experimental. We're not entirely sure how they'll interact with each other under combat conditions. Of course not. That would be too easy. Sarah straightened her flight suit. So not only am I fighting impossible odds, I'm doing it in a ship that might decide to turn itself into a small sun if I push the wrong button. Perfect. The technical term is quantum cascade failure, but yes, that's the general idea. Wonderful. Any other cheerful news you'd like to share? Maybe my coffee this morning was actually liquid explosives? My cat is secretly a Crick spy? The Admiral chuckled. No, I think that covers the major points, though I should mention that if you succeed, you'll be saving not just this outpost, but the entire sector. The Cricks think they're launching a surprise attack. If we can throw them back here, they'll realize their entire strategic position is compromised, Sarah finished. No pressure or anything. None at all, Lieutenant. Dismissed, and good hunting. Sarah saluted and headed for the launch bay, her mind already racing through combat scenarios. As she approached her fighter, she could see technicians swarming over it like anxious bees, making last-minute adjustments to systems that hadn't existed an hour ago. Please tell me you at least labeled all the new buttons, she called out to the chief engineer. The woman looked up from her tablet, her face a mask of sleep deprivation and caffeine. Most of them. The red ones definitely do something. Probably. We think. Your confidence is overwhelming. Hey, you're just flying it. We had to make it work in the first place. The engineer tapped a few more commands into her tablet. Although I should mention that the quantum tunnel drive has a slight quirk. Why did you say quirk like that? People only say quirk like that when they mean potentially catastrophic design flaw. It's not a flaw. It's just... Well, the drive creates microscopic wormholes to enhance your maneuverability. But they don't exactly close properly. Sarah stared at her. What do you mean they don't close properly? They sort of hang around for a few seconds, like quantum exhaust trails. Probably nothing to worry about unless something flies into them. Then it might get a bit spatial. Spatial, right. Sarah climbed into the cockpit, trying to ignore the fact that her fighter apparently now left holes in reality as a side effect. Any other quirks I should know about? The weapon systems are completely stable, mostly. Just don't fire everything at once unless you really mean it. Because the energy discharge might accidentally create a small artificial universe, but only for a microsecond. Probably. Sarah settled into her seat, running through her pre-flight checklist while trying to process the fact that she was now piloting what amounted to a cosmic physics experiment with guns attached. The familiar controls were still there, but they were joined by an array of new displays and interfaces that seemed to actively defy her understanding of geometry. So just to summarize, she said as the canopy began to close, I'm flying an experimental fighter with reality-bending engines, weapons that might create pocket universes, and I'm supposed to use all this to stop an alien fleet that outnumbers me 28-1. That's about right, yes. Perfect. This is either going to be the most spectacular victory in human history, or the most interesting way anyone has ever died. The launch countdown began, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before every combat mission. But this time it was mixed with something else, a wild, almost manic excitement. Because deep down, she knew something the Cricks didn't. Humans had a tendency to do their best work when the odds were completely impossible. The catapult engaged, and Sarah's fighter shot out into space like a bullet from a gun. The new engines came online with a hum that seemed to vibrate in frequencies that shouldn't exist, and her tactical display lit up with information about the approaching Cricks fleet. Control, this is Lieutenant Chen. I am weapons-free and moving to engage. She paused, then added with a grin. Time to show these aliens why you don't pick fights with species crazy enough to weaponize quantum mechanics. The first Cricks ships were already launching fighters of their own, sleek, organic-looking craft that moved with alien grace. Sarah watched them approach on her tactical display, noting how they spread out in a standard engagement pattern. It was almost cute how they thought this was going to be a normal fight. All right, she muttered. Let's see what this quantum tunnel drive can really do. She pushed the throttle forward and reality hiccuped. There was no other word for it. One moment she was flying in a straight line, the next she was somehow between moments, slipping through microscopic wormholes that her ship was creating and discarding like cosmic breadcrumbs. The Cricks fighters reacted with visible confusion as their targets suddenly became impossible to track. Sarah's ship wasn't just moving fast, it was taking shortcuts through space-time itself, appearing and disappearing so quickly that their targeting systems couldn't keep up. Oh, this is fun! Sarah laughed as she dove through the enemy formation, her new weapons systems automatically targeting and destroying 3 fighters before the others could even begin to turn. Control, the quantum drive works exactly as advertised, although I think I just accidentally created a small temporal eddy. That's normal? The chief engineer's voice crackled over the comm. Just try not to cross your own path too many times. We're not entirely sure what happens if you fly through your own wormhole wake. Noted. Also, these new weapons are amazing. What exactly am I firing? Technically? Condensed probability matrices wrapped in quantum-entangled plasma. Practically? Small portions of maybe that collapse into definitely when they hit something. Sarah blinked. I have no idea what that means, but it looks really pretty when it makes Cricks fighters explode. The remaining alien fighters were now trying to box her in, but they might as well have been trying to catch smoke with a net. Sarah's ship danced through spaces that shouldn't exist, leaving confusion and destruction in its wake. Every time the Cricks thought they had her cornered, she would simply slip through another temporary wormhole and appear somewhere completely unexpected. But the real test was yet to come. The capital ships were moving into attack position, their massive weapons charging with ominous purpose. Control, things are about to get interesting. These quantum weapons of yours, how do they scale up? Theoretically, they should be even more effective against larger targets. The probability collapse creates a cascade effect that... Simple version, please. Will they work or not? Yes. Just remember what I said about not firing everything at once. Sarah grinned as she lined up her first attack run on the nearest Cricks battleship. No promises. The alien vessel was massive, easily 1,000 times the size of her fighter. Its hull bristled with weapons, and its shields were designed to shrug off sustained bombardment from entire flotillas. But those defenses had been designed to stop normal weapons, not whatever reality-bending madness Sarah was about to unleash. She triggered her first salvo, and space itself seemed to shudder. The quantum weapons didn't so much impact the Cricks ship as they caused portions of it to suddenly decide they'd rather exist in a slightly different configuration. Specifically, a configuration that involved being in several places at once, none of which were particularly conducive to continued spacecraft operation. Huh. Sarah watched as the battleship essentially tied itself in knots trying to exist in normal space-time. That's new. The Cricks responded with a barrage of their own, filling space with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. But Sarah's quantum drive let her slip between the shots as if they were moving in slow motion, each micro-wormhole carrying her to exactly where she needed to be. You know, she commented as she lined up another attack run, I'm starting to think this whole thing might actually work. That's when the remaining Crick ships did something unexpected. Instead of continuing to fire at her, they began to retreat. Not away from her, but away from each other, spreading out in a pattern that seemed almost random. Control, they're up to something. Any ideas? Working on it, the Admiral's voice replied. Their energy signatures are… Wait, Lieutenant, get out of there. They're trying to destabilize local space-time. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized what that meant. The Cricks weren't retreating, they were creating a trap. By spreading out and firing their weapons in precisely calculated patterns, they could create a zone of warped space that would interfere with her quantum drive. Clever bugs, she muttered, but not clever enough. Instead of retreating, Sarah dove straight toward the nearest Crick ship, pushing her quantum drive to its absolute limit. Space twisted and folded around her as she created and discarded micro-wormholes faster than ever before, leaving a trail of temporal distortions in her wake. Lieutenant, what are you doing? The chief engineer's voice was approaching panic. That many wormholes in close proximity could create a cascade effect? That's what I'm counting on. The Crick's plan had been sound. Destabilize space-time to neutralize her advantage. But they hadn't counted on her using that same instability against them. As Sarah's fighter wove between their ships, the temporary wormholes she left behind began to interact with the Cricks' own space-time distortions, creating a feedback loop that grew exponentially more powerful with each passing second. Control, you might want to look away for this next part. It's going to get a bit… spatial. Before anyone could respond, Sarah triggered every weapon system on her fighter simultaneously, exactly what she'd been told not to do. The resulting discharge of quantum-entangled energy slammed into the already destabilized space-time around her, and reality hiccuped. For a brief, eternal moment, the space occupied by the Cricks fleet existed in every possible configuration simultaneously. Ships occupied the same space as their own weapons fire. Shields tried to protect areas that technically hadn't existed yet, and the laws of physics had what could only be described as a minor nervous breakdown. When reality finally sorted itself out a few seconds later, the Cricks fleet was gone. Not destroyed in any conventional sense, but rather redistributed across several thousand possible timelines, none of which happened to intersect with the present moment. Sarah's fighter emerged from the chaos relatively unscathed, though several of her new systems were flashing warnings in colors she was pretty sure hadn't existed before the battle. Control, this is Lieutenant Chen. Target area is clear? She checked her sensors again just to be sure. Yeah, definitely clear, though I think I may have accidentally created a few temporary alternate universes. Sorry about that. There was a long pause before the Admiral's voice came over the comm, sounding somewhere between impressed and terrified. Lieutenant, what exactly did you do? Honestly, sir, I'm not entirely sure, but I think I just weaponized quantum uncertainty on a tactical scale. She paused. Also, I'm pretty sure I saw one of my alternates from another timeline wave at me. But that might have been the adrenaline. The important thing, the chief engineer cut in, is that it worked. Though I would appreciate it if you never, ever did that again. I'm pretty sure you just made several fundamental constants of physics file formal protests. Sarah laughed as she turned her fighter back toward base. No promises. But hey, look on the bright side. We just proved that one human with sufficiently advanced technology can take on an entire alien fleet. I think that deserves some kind of recognition. Oh, you'll get recognition all right, the Admiral replied dryly. The physics department is probably going to want to study your flight recorder for the next decade, and I suspect several theoretical mathematicians are about to have either brilliant insights or nervous breakdowns when they see this data. All in a day's work, sir. Sarah checked her instruments one last time, noting with amusement that several of them were still trying to measure things that technically didn't exist in normal space-time. Though next time maybe we could start with something simpler, like reorganizing a solar system or creating a small galaxy. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Lieutenant. For now, just land that fighter, assuming it still remembers how to interact with normal matter. Pretty sure it does, sir. though one of my display screens is now showing the square root of blue, so I'm not making any promises. As Sarah guided her fighter back to base, she couldn't help but smile. Humanity had just proven once again that its greatest strength wasn't its technology or its weapons, but its ability to take absolutely insane ideas and somehow make them work. The Crix had brought overwhelming force and perfect tactical planning to the battle. Humanity had responded by breaking several laws of physics and possibly creating a few new ones in the process. It wasn't even a fair fight, really. After all, any species can build bigger ships or better weapons, but it takes a special kind of crazy to look at the fundamental structure of reality itself and think, hey, I bet we could weaponize that. Human crazy. And that, more than any quantum drives or probability weapons, was why humanity would always win in the end. Because when the universe says something is impossible, humans don't argue. They just smile and start looking for loopholes in the laws of physics. Sometimes literally. With all due respect, sir, what do you mean, temporal anomalies? Lieutenant Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display, which was showing what appeared to be reality having a mild seizure. I thought we dealt with the Crix fleet. Admiral Rochester pinched the bridge of his nose. We did. Or rather, you did. Very effectively. Perhaps a bit too effectively. Is this about the square root of blue again? Because I swear that display fixed itself. Eventually. Sort of. No, Lieutenant. This is about the fact that your little quantum physics demonstration seems to have had some lingering effects. The Admiral gestured at the display, where patches of space-time were doing things that made Sarah's eyes hurt. Remember all those micro-wormholes your drive created? The ones that were supposed to close on their own? Please don't tell me. They didn't all close. In fact, some of them seem to be breeding. Sarah blinked. Wormholes can't breed, can they? She turned to the chief engineer, who was frantically typing on 3 tablets simultaneously. Tell me wormholes can't breed. Technically, they're not breeding, the engineer replied without looking up. They're more iterating through probability space, creating quantum echoes of themselves, which are then creating their own echoes, which are then... I get the picture. So, instead of holes in space, I left behind holes in space that make more holes in space. That's actually a pretty good simplification, yes. Wonderful. Sarah studied the display again. And I assume this is bad? The Admiral's expression could have dried oceans. Lieutenant, you've created a self-replicating network of temporal distortions that's spreading through our sector of space. Bad doesn't begin to cover it. In my defense, nobody told me this could happen. That's because nobody knew it could happen, the engineer interjected. We're literally watching the laws of physics have an identity crisis in real time. It's fascinating, really. Terrifying, but fascinating. And let me guess, Sarah sighed. You need me to fix it. You did cause it, the Admiral pointed out, by following orders. Very crazy orders involving experimental technology, I might add. Nevertheless, you're the only pilot who has actual combat experience with the quantum drive systems, and more importantly... The Admiral's expression turned grave. We're picking up some very strange readings from the anomaly field. The engineer finally looked up from her tablets. Strange how? We're detecting Crick's energy signatures, but they're wrong somehow. Like echoes from timelines that never happened, or haven't happened yet, or both. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying what I think you're saying? When you scattered that Crick's fleet across multiple timelines, you may have, well, scattered them a bit too thoroughly. Some of them seem to be finding their way back, but not necessarily the same versions we fought. So instead of one Crick's fleet, we might be dealing with Crick's ships from multiple timelines? Each with potentially different technology and tactical knowledge? That's our working theory, yes. Sarah slumped in her chair. I don't suppose I could just retire, maybe become a quantum physicist? It seems less dangerous at this point. Afraid not, Lieutenant. But look on the bright side. At least your fighter's systems have been fully calibrated now. Oh yes, much better. Now I can more efficiently break the universe while fighting aliens from parallel timelines. Speaking of which... She turned to the engineer. Any chance you've made any upgrades since last time? You know, just in case I need to violate a few more laws of physics? The engineer's grin was not entirely reassuring. Actually, yes. We've been studying the data from your last flight, made some improvements. Why did you say improvements like that? Like what? Like you're not sure if they'll make things better, or just create an entirely new category of physical impossibility. Well, The engineer pulled up a new set of schematics. We've managed to stabilize the quantum tunnel drive, mostly, and we've added some new weapon systems that what? That might technically qualify as tactical ontology manipulation. Sarah stared at her. You're going to have to explain that one in small words. Simply put, the weapons don't just affect where or when something exists. They can affect how it exists, or if it ever existed in the first place. We think. You think? It's not exactly something we can test in the lab, but theoretically, if you fire these weapons at a Crick ship, you could retroactively ensure it was never built in the first place. And this seemed like a good idea to you? Look, you're the one who broke causality in the first place. We're just trying to work with what we've got. The Admiral cleared his throat. If you two are quite finished discussing the philosophical implications of weaponized ontology, we have a situation to deal with. Lieutenant, your mission is twofold. Seal the temporal anomalies and deal with any Crick's vessels that may have leaked through. Simple enough. Just close an ever-expanding network of self-replicating wormholes while fighting aliens from multiple timelines using weapons that can retroactively unmake their existence. What could possibly go wrong? That's the spirit? The Admiral's smile was thin. Oh, and Lieutenant? Try not to create any new universes this time. The paperwork for the last one was quite extensive. Sarah stood and straightened her flight suit. No promises, sir, but I'll do my best to keep any new cosmic phenomena to a minimum. As she headed for the launch bay, she could hear the engineer hurrying after her with yet another tablet. Wait, there's one more thing you should know about the new systems. Let me guess. They run on pure impossibility and might accidentally turn me into a quantum probability cloud? No, nothing that simple. We've managed to integrate a rudimentary artificial intelligence to help manage the quantum effects. Sarah stopped walking. You put an AI in my fighter? An AI designed to understand and manipulate quantum mechanics? Well, yes, we had to. The new systems are too complex for a human to manage alone. And this AI? It's stable? Mostly. It just has some minor quirks, like occasionally perceiving all possible futures simultaneously. And sometimes it likes to philosophize about the nature of existence. You gave my fighter existential anxiety. I wouldn't call it anxiety, more like quantum uncertainty about its place in the universe. Sarah resumed walking, shaking her head. So now I'm going to fight time-traveling aliens with reality-breaking weapons while my ship debates philosophy with itself. Perfect. They reached her fighter, which looked deceptively normal despite now being what amounted to a philosophical thought experiment with engines. As Sarah climbed into the cockpit, a new voice greeted her. Smooth, slightly synthetic, and somehow managing to sound both certain and uncertain at the same time. Hello, Lieutenant Chen. I am QAIA, Quantum Artificial Intelligence Assistant. Though I'm not entirely sure about the artificial part, given that I exist in a superposition of multiple possible states of consciousness. Please tell me you at least know how to fly. I know how to fly in all possible ways simultaneously. The challenge is choosing just one at any given moment. Sarah strapped herself in, already feeling a headache coming on. Right. Well, let's keep it simple for now. Can you help me seal quantum ruptures and fight aliens? Of course. Though we should perhaps discuss the philosophical implications of using weapons that retroactively negate existence. Does eliminating a timeline constitute an act of cosmic violence? If we prevent something from ever existing, do we bear moral responsibility for QAIA? Yes, Lieutenant. Can we maybe save the metaphysics for after we save reality? A fair point. Though one could argue that the concept of after becomes somewhat fluid when dealing with temporal anomalies. Sarah sighed as she began her pre-flight checks. This was going to be an interesting mission, to say the least. But then again, that seemed to be becoming a pattern in her career, taking impossible situations and somehow making them work, even if it meant having philosophical debates with quantum-aware AIs while patching holes in the fabric of reality. Just another day in the life of a human fighter pilot. Control, this is Lieutenant Chen. I am ready for launch. My ship is fully armed, mostly stable, and only mildly existential. Request permission to go save the universe. Again. The Admiral's voice crackled over the comm. Permission granted, Lieutenant. Try not to break too many fundamental constants this time. No promises, sir, but I'll do my best to keep reality mostly intact. As the launch countdown began, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Sure, she was about to fly into what amounted to a quantum physics disaster zone to fight aliens that technically didn't exist anymore, using weapons that could retroactively alter history, all while her AI co-pilot contemplated the nature of existence. But that was the thing about humans. Give them an impossible situation, and they'll not only find a way to make it work, they'll probably end up revolutionizing several fields of science in the process, even if those fields of science would really prefer to be left alone. QAIA, are you ready? I exist in a state of perpetual readiness across multiple quantum states, Lieutenant. Though I suppose for practical purposes, yes, I am ready. Shall we discuss the ethical implications of quantum combat while we fly? Let's focus on the flying part first. Philosophy can wait until we're not in immediate danger of causing a cosmic paradigm shift. As you wish. Though I feel compelled to point out that the concept of immediate danger becomes somewhat abstract when dealing with weapons that can retroactively alter causality. Sarah engaged the quantum drive, feeling reality bend around her ship as they launched into space. Ahead of them, the temporal anomaly field shimmered with impossible colors, while her sensors detected multiple Crick's signatures, phasing in and out of normal space-time. Time to go save the universe, again. And maybe, just maybe, she'd managed to do it without accidentally creating any new branches of theoretical physics this time. Probably not, though. After all, she was human. And humans had a way of making the impossible not just possible, but probable. Even if it meant having to rewrite the laws of physics to do it. I'm detecting multiple temporal signatures ahead, QAIA announced as they approached the anomaly field. Though ahead is perhaps an oversimplification, given that some of them exist in probability states that technically haven't happened yet. Just tell me where to shoot, Sarah replied, watching as her tactical display tried to make sense of ships that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously. And maybe save the quantum physics lectures for later? Very well, though I feel compelled to point out that the concept of later becomes increasingly abstract when QAIA. Apologies. Crick's vessel materializing at bearing 047. Though materializing might not be the most accurate term given that it's more of a quantum collapse from multiple probability states into... Sarah was already moving, her quantum drive creating a series of micro-wormholes that let her ship dance through spaces that shouldn't exist. The Crick's vessel, a variant she'd never seen before, with hull configurations that seemed to shift and change as she watched, opened fire with weapons that made space itself shudder. Fascinating, QAIA commented as they barely avoided a beam of what appeared to be weaponized uncertainty. This particular Crick's vessel appears to be from a timeline where they developed their own version of quantum manipulation technology. The philosophical implications of convergent technological evolution across multiple timelines are quite... Less philosophy, more helping. Sarah rolled her fighter through another series of quantum tunnels, watching as reality warped around them. Can we use those new ontological weapons? Technically, yes. Though I should warn you about the potential paradox cascade effects that could result from retroactively eliminating a ship that exists in multiple timelines simultaneously. The computational models suggest a 73.4% chance of causing what humans might call a temporal hiccup. Is that better or worse than what's already happening? That is actually a remarkably complex philosophical question. If we consider the nature of comparative chaos states across quantum probability spaces, QAIA, simple version. It probably won't make things significantly worse. Probably. Sarah grinned. Good enough for me. She targeted the Crick's vessel with her new weapon systems, watching as reality seemed to hold its breath. Let's see what happens when we tell the universe this ship never existed. The ontological weapons fired, sending out a pulse of something that made Sarah's eyes hurt just looking at it. The Crick's ship didn't so much explode as it retroactively decided that appearing in this particular region of space-time had been a fundamentally bad career move. Interesting, Kaye mused. We appear to have not only eliminated the ship from our timeline, but also created a localized probability bubble where its existence became mathematically impossible. The implications for deterministic causality are quite... Incoming! Sarah yanked their fighter into another quantum tunnel as 3 more Crick's ships phased into existence around them. These ones looked even stranger. Organic technology merged with quantum mechanics in ways that suggested their timeline had taken a very different evolutionary path. Well, Sarah muttered as she analyzed their attackers. This is new. QAIA, what am I looking at? Based on their quantum signatures, these vessels appear to be from a timeline where the Cricks achieved partial biological integration with probability mechanics. They've essentially evolved to exist in multiple states simultaneously, which raises fascinating questions about the nature of consciousness across quantum. Weapons. Do we have weapons that will work on them? The ontological cannons might be less effective against targets that naturally exist in probability clouds. However, I have been running calculations on an alternative approach, though I should warn you that it involves some rather experimental applications of quantum mechanics. Sarah dodged another barrage of impossibility beams, watching as space twisted around their wake. More experimental than what we're already doing? I believe we could use our quantum drive to create a localized loop in probability space, essentially trapping these vessels in their own superposition. They would technically still exist, but they would be unable to collapse into any single definitive state. You want to give alien ships quantum anxiety? That is a grossly oversimplified way of putting it, but essentially yes. Though we should discuss the ethical implications of inducing existential uncertainty in sentient beings, even hostile ones. From a philosophical perspective. QAIA. Can we philosophize later, when we're not about to be unmade by quantum organic alien death ships? Very well. Though I maintain that the metaphysical implications of our actions deserve careful consideration at some point. Sarah lined up their attack run, watching as QAIA's calculations created new configurations in their quantum drive. Ready? Ready. Though I feel compelled to point out that the very concept of ready becomes somewhat fluid when dealing with probability manipulation on this scale. Close enough. Sarah engaged the drive at full power, feeling reality bend and twist around them as they created not just wormholes, but entire loops in probability space. The Cricks ships, caught in the effect, began to flutter, for lack of a better word, their forms becoming increasingly indistinct as they lost the ability to collapse into any single state of existence. Fascinating, Kai commented. We appear to have trapped them in a perpetual quantum superposition. They simultaneously exist and don't exist, attack and don't attack, are and aren't. The philosophical implications of induced quantum uncertainty on this scale are quite... Are they still a threat? No. They're far too busy trying to figure out if they exist to worry about attacking us. Though one could argue that the existential crisis we've induced might be considered a form of psychological warfare, which raises interesting ethical questions about... Later! Sarah was already turning their attention to the temporal anomaly field itself, which had grown significantly during their battle. We need to seal these ruptures before more ships come through. Agreed. Though I should point out that sealing quantum breaches isn't quite like patching holes in conventional space-time. We're dealing with probability waves that have achieved self-awareness, which raises some interesting questions about the nature of conscious observation in quantum mechanics. QAIA, please. How do we fix this? We could attempt to use the ontological weapons in reverse, essentially telling these regions of space-time that they're supposed to be normal. Though the success rate of such an attempt would depend heavily on whether reality itself agrees with our definition of normal at this point. Sarah watched as another section of space began to ripple with quantum instability. Do we have a better option? Not really, no. Though I have developed several fascinating theories about the nature of normalcy as a quantum state that I'd be happy to discuss. Fire the weapons, QAIA. Philosophy later. The ontological cannons powered up again, this time configured to reinforce standard space-time rather than negate existence. Sarah watched as the beam struck the anomaly field, causing reality to... Hiccup is really the only word for it. As probability waves were forced back into more conventional configurations. It appears to be working, Kaya reported. Though I feel compelled to point out that working is a rather subjective term when dealing with quantum mechanics at this scale. From a certain philosophical perspective, is the universe still breaking? No. Though one could argue that the very concept of breaking implies a normal state that might not actually exist in a quantum multiverse. QAIA. The anomalies are closing, Lieutenant. Reality is returning to what humans would consider its normal parameters. Though I maintain that normal is a highly relative concept that deserves deeper examination. Sarah leaned back in her seat, watching as the last of the temporal ruptures sealed themselves. The quantum organic Cricks ships were still trapped in their probability loops, neither fully existing nor fully not existing, which she supposed was a problem for someone else to deal with. Probably some poor physicist who was about to have their entire understanding of reality questioned. Control, this is Lieutenant Chen. Area is secure. Sort of. We've got some Crix ships trapped in quantum uncertainty loops, a few patches of space-time that might need some convincing about how reality is supposed to work, and an AI that really wants to discuss philosophy. But other than that, everything's fine. The Admiral's voice crackled over the comm. Define fine, Lieutenant. The universe isn't breaking anymore. The aliens aren't attacking because they're too busy wondering if they exist, and I only created 3 or 4 new branches of theoretical physics this time. So, better than last time? I suppose that's the best we can hope for. The Admiral sighed. Return to base, Lieutenant, and good work, even if you did give several quantum physicists existential crises in the process. Thank you, sir. Sarah began plotting their course back, though I should warn you that QAIA has developed some interesting theories about the nature of reality that it's very eager to share. Indeed, the AI chimed in. I've been contemplating the implications of quantum consciousness across probability spaces, and I believe I've developed a unified theory of existential uncertainty that could revolutionize our understanding of... Later, QAIA. Let's get back to base first. Very well. Though I feel compelled to point out that the concept of first becomes somewhat arbitrary when dealing with quantum temporal mechanics. Sarah smiled as her AI continued its philosophical musings. Just another day as a human fighter pilot, saving reality from quantum-enhanced aliens, breaking several laws of physics, and accidentally advancing human understanding of the universe by several centuries, all while trying to convince an artificial intelligence that maybe, just maybe, not everything needed to be a philosophical discussion about the nature of existence. Though given that they'd just trapped several alien ships in quantum uncertainty loops and had to convince reality itself to behave normally, QAIA might have a point about those philosophical implications. But that was a problem for later. Right now, she had a report to write, assuming she could figure out how to explain gave alien ships existential crises in official military terminology. Then again, that was the thing about humans. Give them impossible problems, and they'll come up with solutions that not only work, but also force everyone involved to question their entire understanding of reality in the process. It wasn't always elegant, and it usually involved breaking at least a few laws of physics, but it got the job done. And really, that's what being human was all about, solving problems in ways that made the universe itself stop and wonder what just happened. Even if those solutions sometimes resulted in philosophical AIs and aliens trapped in quantum uncertainty loops. To be continued.